And yeah, we'll start with the class today. And if we recap yesterday's class, we were discussing about some of the contributions in the field of bacteriology, virology, nematology, and other plant pathology disciplines. And later we classified to the diseases based on the causalates, which we defined it as the biotic, mesobiotic, and abiotic agents. And also we classified the diseases based on the physiological processes, which is dependent on the physiology of the plant. Today, we are going to classify the plant diseases based on the host or the host which are going to be affected. How the classification can be done. It is very, very simple way of classifying based on the host is the diseases caused in the cereals. That is called as the cereal diseases. Classification of the diseases, plant diseases based on the host plants which is affected. And we need to also provide an example for this. For example, it is the rice blast disease. The rice blast disease, which is caused by Pyrocularia oryzae, which is a causal agent, which is known to cause the rice blast disease. Similarly, there is another disease which is the millet smut. The smut disease, which is caused by the Specialotheca sorghum, oftenly seen in case of the sorghum, which is the smut of smorgasm, most oftenly called as. Okay, and the diseases caused on the fruits, that is called as the fruit diseases. The fruit diseases, the example is the mango anthracnose. Mango anthracnose is one of the classical example. And the diseases caused in the trees, the tree diseases. The tree diseases, the example is the chestnut blight. The chestnut blight. And lastly, it is the diseases caused in the vegetables. Diseases caused in the vegetables, and the best example would be damping off disease. Damping off of all the vegetables most commonly can be seen. So this is how we can classify the plant diseases based on the host which are affected. And we can also classify the diseases based on the parts or the plant parts affected, or the plant parts which are being affected. So you know very well the parts include the roots, the diseases which are known to cause the diseases on a roots in some of the plant species, like the root rot disease, which is caused by Macrophomina phaseolina, which is a very common pathogen known to cause the root rots in many of the cereals as well as in case of the vegetable crops. And similarly, the diseases caused on the stem. Okay. There are some diseases which are often seen on the stem region. That is, one is the stem blight of salmon, which is caused by Phytophthora drexleri. Phytophthora drexleri is a causal agent of the stem blight of the salmon. And similarly, there are n number of diseases that are known to cause the symptoms on the leaves. One of the common classical example is the Tikka disease of groundnut. The Tikka disease of the groundnut, which is caused by Cercospora arachidicola. Cercospora arachidicola is the example for this. And in some cases, the diseases can also be seen on the flowers. Okay. The one of the example is the tulip color-breaking virus. So this is a disease on tulips, which often result in the breakage of the colors, the color breaking because of the viral disease. And here there is an advantage because of this particular viral disease is, for example, if a tulip flower having a normal red color, and if there are some breakages due to the viral diseases, instead of, so this is going to fetch the higher price compared to the normal price. For example, if a flower is red, it is going to fetch around $5. If it is the color broken one, it is going to fetch around $10. So that is one advantage due to the plant disease, but this is an exception, I can say. And at the last, the diseases caused on the fruits. There are n number of diseases, but we'll take one classical example for this, is the fruit rot of chili. The fruit rot of chili, which is caused by Trichum capsicum. Trichum capsicum is one of the examples of. And this is how we can classify the diseases based on the plant parts which are affected. And now we will see classification of the plant diseases based on the symptoms, which is very, very important. Which is due to the character and the appearance of a visible pathogen. Many attacks, the symptoms. We are classifying the diseases based on the symptoms. So here we will start with the most common, which is the mildews. The mildews, in which a pathogen is seen as the pathogen is basically seen as an overgrowth on the leaf. Overgrowth, which is seen as a growth, which is a mildew type of growth on the green surface of the host. Sometimes the growth appears as the white, brownish, or sometimes purplish in nature. It all depends upon the type of pathogen which is infecting. Superficially, you can see that there is something like a powdery growth on the surface or on the undersurface of the leaf. And among the mildews, the downy mildew is a common, which is very common in grapes, as well as in case of the cucurbits and many of the crops, basically, where the downy mildew is basically a superficial growth which is tangled, or it is a cottony on a downy layer. That's why it is called as a downy mildew on the lower surface of the leaf. Basically, you can imagine, like, you can see it is appearing just like a cotton threads on a leaf, which are basically entangled, or it is present on the surface of the host. So you will see something like, the threads of the cotton, if you observe under microscope. Another mildew is a powdery mildew. These two are very common mildews, which is again a superficial growth of a fungus and appears more of like a dusty or powdery appearance. And you'll see that there are some growth on that, and you'll see some kind of fruiting bodies on that. Fruiting bodies are nothing but it's just like a fruit having the spores in it. So this is two types of mildews. One is a downy mildew and another one is a powdery mildew. Another disease or symptoms which is commonly seen in plants is called as a rust, which we are talking a lot. Rust, you can imagine, similar to that of, iron getting rusted. So here it appears on a leaf as a small pustules, rusty pustules. Rusty pustules means a small spores which appears like a rust. And these are basically the spores. That is the fungal spores, where they break out from the epidermis of the host. And these pustules are basically like a dusty compact. A dusty compact which are red or sometimes the brown or yellow or orange or black in color. It again depends upon the type of the rust. Okay, the rust, which is a very serious problem in many of the crop plants. The third type of symptom is the smut disease. Smut means a kind of a sooty or a charcoal-like powder, which is a sooty or a charcoal-like powder. Oftenly, the smut diseases are seen on the grains. I repeat, often. The affected plant parts show black or a purplish. You can see that some of them, they become either black like a charcoal powder or like a purplish, which is normally black, dusty mass of fungal spores. They are basically like a charcoal powder, but they are the fungal spores. As I mentioned, the symptoms appear on the floral organs, particularly the ovary parts. And if you look into the difference between the smut and the rust spores, the smut spores are quite bigger compared to that of the rust spores. There are only few examples of the smut seen on other parts. The smuts also, they are found on the leaf, stem, and the roots. Okay, that one of the example is the leaf smut of rice. The leaf smut of rice, Entilloma oryzae. Entilloma oryzae. And the root is very, very rare. Okay. The third or the fourth type of symptom is the white blisters. The white blisters. This is oftenly seen in case of one particular crop. This is in case of the crucifers, where the cruciferous plant basically consists of numerous white kind of blisters, which is again like a pustules, like a rust pustules. And when they come out, they expose like a white powdery mass of spores. This is called as a white rust. When they come out from the epidermis, they appear like a white powdery mass of spores. This is very similar to that of a rust, but the color is white. That is why it is called as a white rust. Very similar to that of a rust. It is also belonging to the same rust group, but It is a white in color, whereas the other rest are either yellow, orange, brown, black, and so on. And we have a classification of a disease based on a symptom that is a scab. The scab. The scab is often seen on the fruit, mainly an apple, which is basically having a kind of roughened portion on a fruit, a roughened portion or a crust like lesion, which normally has a freckled appearance. Freckled appearance is a roughened portion of tissue, which is due to the disease, which is called as a scab, which is the example is the apple scab. The name of a disease itself is a apple scab. And we have a fungal structure is often seen on as a symptom, sclerosia. Sclerosia is a fungal structure seen on a plant as a symptom, which is basically a kind of a compact, hard mass of the fungal mycelium. The fungal mycelium. You can just imagine as similar to that of your mustard seed or a ragi seed. It exactly resembles the same. But it is a compact, hard mass of the fungal mycelium. That is, the mycelium becomes like a ragi or a mustard seed. So it is black or a dark brown or purple in color, which is one of the structure of the fungus again. Another one is the blotch disease. Is that a blotch disease? Which is a blotch is something where I can refer it to as a superficial growth on a fruit. The superficial growth on a fruit or like a blotched appearance. If you take a fruit, you'll see that there is a kind of a symptom which is basically having a blotchy appearance, like a sooty blotch or a fly speck, a fly speck in case of apple. So we can say that there is a blotch on a particular fruit. It's something like we can define like that. Okay, and another type of symptoms which we come across is the fruiting body. The fruiting, the word itself explains about fruiting. What is a fruiting body? Normally, the fruiting body is again a type of structure produced by the fungi, mainly like you can imagine like a wood rotting fungi that develops into a spore-bearing structure, which is called as sporophore, which can be a fleshy like your mushroom. Your mushroom is also a fruiting body, and it can be a woody. And remember, the fruiting body is one of the identification character of the fungus. The spore-bearing structure is also called as a the spore means seed. Seed and the spore are synonyms. Synonyms is the same basically. And in some cases, the symptoms appear like exudations. Exudations means something is coming out from the infected part, like a gum or an exudations. This is a very common in case of the bacterial leaf blight. the blight of rice. And also, it is also very common in case of the fire blight of apple, where you can see that there is some kind of exudation that is coming out. So this is a common phenomenon of some of the diseases which are exhibiting as an exudations, which often are from the infected portions. Some symptoms appear like a tar spot, which is like, a drop of tar fallen on a leaf. It appears very similar to that, which is a raised black coated fungal bodies, which, like, a drop of tar has fallen on a leaf. And apart from this, the symptoms due to the effects or change in the host plants, because due to the symptoms, there is a change in the host plants because of the symptoms. What are those? There are, due to diseases, there are many marked changes that is brought about. One could be your size of the plant parts, the color, which is a very common one. The texture is also can be changed. And the altitude is also changed. And habit of the plants also changes due to the disease symptoms. Among them, the color change is basically a common one, which is very often seen, a common symptom in all plants due to the diseases. One of which is the loss of green may disappear, or it might be replaced with the yellow pigmentation that is called as a chlorosis. What is a chlorosis? Chlorosis is a loss of green color, that is a normal green color, which disappears, or it is replaced by the yellow pigmentation. That is called as a chlorosis. In some cases where the loss of green color due to the prolonged exposure to the darkness, means not in exactly in our subtropical region, but in temperate region, when a plant is exposed for a prolonged exposure to the darkness, then that particular condition is called as a etiolation. It can also happen due to low temperature. It can also happen with a low iron content, or even the excess lime or alkaline condition. That means there is a loss of green color, which is due to maybe a prolonged darkness, or even these conditions can also affect it. In some of the diseases, when a green pigment is replaced by a red or a purple or an orange pigmentation, that is called as a chromosis. That is, when a green pigment is replaced by the red, purple, or an orange pigmentation. That particular condition is called as a chromosis. In a case where the leaf is completely devoid of a pigment, any pigment for that matter, so that condition is albinism, complete loss of the pigments at all. This is seen in some cases, especially in the Phytoplasia diseases where they lose the color, any kind of pigments. Another particular type of the size and the texture and changes is basically seen as an overgrowth or the hypertrophy, which is called as a hypertrophy. So the hypertrophy is basically an abnormal increase in the size of one or more organs of the plant, which results in an excessive growth. It could be because of an increase in the size of the cells. Increase in the size of a cell. So what is a hypertrophy? Which is basically an abnormal increase in the organs of a plant, which is resulting in excessive growth, which is due to the increase in the size of a cell, size of a plant cell or an organ. And we have another particular term that is called as a hyperplasia. Hyperplasia is also an abnormal increase in the size of a plant organ due to the increase in the number of cells. In case of your the hypertrophy, it is also increase in the size of an organ, which is due to the increase in the size of a cell. Whereas in hyperplasia, it is due to the increase in the number of cells. Increase in the number of cells. Another deformation which we see is a atrophy, which is also called as a hypoplasia or dwarfing, which is a very common symptom in many of the diseases again. The atrophy, hypoplasia, or a dwarfing is a disease resulting in inhibition of the growth, resulting in a stunting or a dwarfing symptoms. So due to disease is a decrease in the size of the plant organs. Another type of symptom we see in fungal as well as in case of the bacterial diseases, the water soaking lesions. Like it is commonly seen in many of the plants. A particular disease producing and surrounding to it, you will see that there is the lesion which is like water soaked, which is a translucent condition of a tissue, which is a translucent condition of a tissue due to water moving from the host cells into the intracellular spaces. If these are the plant cells, so whatever that the cell that is present due to pathogen, they will come out and they will accumulate in the, they will get accumulated in the intracellular spaces, because of which you will see that there is a translucent condition, which is oftenly seen due to the enzymes that break the cell wall. Enzymes that break the cell wall. And another symptom, which is a very common one, that is a necrosis. It is also called as a cell death. Necrosis or a cell death. A condition indicating the cell death of or a tissue or an organ as a result of the pathogen. activity. It is nothing but the portion which is having completely where the cells of a particular tissue is dead. Appearance of a dead area, which differs from the one host to another host. The necrosis of a rice can be different, and necrosis of a apple can be different, or a mango can be different. And necrosis also differs with the organs and also the type of parasites. Like the small examples, if we say the spots, the leaf spots, streaks is also a type of necrosis. The stripes due to the diseases on leaves. Canker is also another type. The blight is also another type of necrosis. Also a type of necrosis. The anthracnose is another symptom which is oftenly called as an ulcer type of symptom. It is similar to that of your ulcer, which is a Greek word used to define ulcer, which is basically a kind of a symptom which is appears like an ulcer lesion, which can be on the leaves or twigs, even on the pods, even on the fruits, which is basically a sunken lesion. A sunken ulcer type of lesion is called as an anthracnose. And it is also another type of necrosis, basically. It is another type of a necrosis. A dieback, which is a type of necrosis where if you imagine like a particular tissue or a particular part of the plant, and the necrosis starts with the terminal portion, that is at the tip, at the terminal tissue of the twig or a stem or a branch, and they start dying from the tip towards the base or tip towards the downwards. That is dying from tip to downward. That is why it is called a dieback. Okay. And wilt is another very common disease symptom, or a disease basically, which is commonly leading to drying of a plant, wilting of a plant, and oftenly leading to a condition called as an epinasty. Epinasty is something like, the leaves droop, the lower portion of the leaves droop. Loss of turgidity is another symptom of a wilt disease. Loss of turgidity, that is, leaves and other green parts lose the turgidity, become flaccid and droop. Become flaccid and droop. So the effect starts from leaves, later to the young growing tips, and finally to the whole plants. Here you can see that the pathogen gets or destroys the vascular tissues. Thereby, you will see that there is an epinasty, loss of turgidity, flaccidity, and drooping. And suddenly the plant collapses. Suddenly the plant collapses or dies. So the wilting is commonly due to the root injury. That is, if there is any root injury, but because of a pathogen. Plugging of your water conducting vessel, or the toxic substances secreted by the pathogen. which is normally affecting the movement of water and nutrients. Okay. So this is wilt can be also mainly due to fungi and bacteria. There are many fungi which are known to produce the wilt symptoms, and also the bacteria are also capable. One of the bacterial disease which is a very common and a serious problem. Mummification, which is a very common in case of the fruits. This is a final stage of certain fruit rot. At the final stage of the fruit rot, the fruits will be dried and normally shriveled and wrinkled. You can see that some fruits, they reduce size, they become shriveled, and upon that, the fruit will become like, they will be like very hardy because of mainly the loss of moisture due to premature of a flesh by the fungal hyphae. That is, the fungal growth where they remove all the moisture, because of which the fruit will be mummified, and that fruit will remain as it is for a longer period. This is seen in some of the diseases in mango, apple, and grapes. We have some of the miscellaneous symptoms. Like some of them we see as alteration in symmetry or habit. Alteration in symmetry or in habit. Some of the diseases lead to what we call it as a premature dropping of the leaves. Premature dropping of the leaves, blossoms, fruits, and so on. Because of the senescence. The senescence, some pathogens induce the plant to produce more ethylene, thereby the premature dropping of the leaves is seen. And another type of symptom is the organ replacement by a new structures. Like, for example, the disease which caused by Phytoplasmas phyllodi, where the vegetative structure, the reproductive structure is converted into the vegetative leafy-like structures, which is a common type of symptom, but it is going to change or replace the organs into a different or a new structure as such. So another way of classifying the diseases is based on the spread of the pathogen. This is another way of classifying, that is based on the spread of the pathogen. So how we can classify the diseases based on the mode of spread, more specifically, which is the mode of spread of the pathogen. There are certain group of pathogens which are normally spread through air. They are called as airborne. Like for your coronavirus, which is an airborne pathogen. Here we can call this as airborne diseases. Airborne diseases. All your foliar diseases, that is the leaf spots, blights, downy mildew, powdery mildew, all are airborne and they are foliar diseases. One of the examples that you can take is the Tikka disease. And there are a good number of the diseases which are spread through seeds, which are called as a seed-borne diseases. One of the classical example is your loose smut of wheat. The loose smut of wheat, which is caused by Stilago tretici. Stilago tretici. Many of your wilt and the root rot causing pathogens are surviving as soil-borne pathogens or soil-borne diseases. Soil-borne diseases, which I had given one example earlier, that is the root rot of pulses. That is a Macrophomina fasciolina. Macrophomina fasciolina, which I have given already the best example for that. There are several diseases which are transmitted by the vector, which are called as a vector-borne diseases. And most of your viral and some of your bacterial diseases are transmitted mainly by the insect vectors. Like, for example, is your rice tungro. The rice tungro, which are transmitted by green leaf hoppers. And also the tomato leaf curl virus, which is transmitted by Bemisia tabaci, which is a whitefly, which is oftenly transmitting this the tomato leaf curl virus. And some of them are also the waterborne diseases, mainly again the soil-borne, the root rot causing and the wilt causing ones. And of course, the humans are also one of the ways how they are spreading by transporting the seeds, infected seeds, the soil and so on. And even the birds, because birds visit the diseased plant and go to the healthy plant. So thereby you can see that there is a spread of the pathogens or a disease. And we can also classify the diseases based on the severity and the spread again. So the severity and the spread of infection. The severity of infection and the spread, we can classify the diseases as endemic disease. Endemic means it is prevalent in and confined to a particular country, district, or a location. What is it? It is confined to a particular country, district, or a location, and very prevalent in that. And when a disease is more or less constantly present year after year, so year after year, you will see that this disease is appearing in a moderate to severe form in a geographic region. In a moderate to severe form in a geographical region. It can be classified as an endemic to that area. It is classified to be as an endemic to that of an area. So here the agent is well established in a field, in a locality and a condition because of a favorable condition. Because of a favorable condition and availability of an alternate host, means other host is available apart from the main host. The example for the endemic disease in case of plant diseases, that is a wart disease, which is caused by Syncytium endobioticum. Syncytium endobioticum is the endemic. You can take your Udbata disease of paddy is also an endemic disease. And the second one is an epidemic. By this time you know or it is also called as epiphytic, which is now we can understand when the COVID started, it was an epidemic. Now it has become a pandemic. Epidemic is a word derived from a Greek word, means among people. Mainly, this was derived for human diseases applied to those humans which appear very violently among a large section of people. That is, it is often said for the people where it appears very violently among large section of people. And the same thing is carried to the plants. Epidemic or an epiphytic disease. Epiphytic disease which occurs widely but periodically. It appears widely but also periodically. It may occur in a locality every year, but assumes in a severe form. Please note, that is very important. It assumes in a very severe form. And why it is? Because of the environmental condition. Whenever there is a suitable environmental condition, it appears in a severe form. So all diseases that permit through their survival on an alternate host or a wild host from one crop to another crop to another season is included. That means to say that any disease that is having, which is the pathogen is surviving in an alternate host or a wild host, which can come from one season to another season, can be called as an epidemic, and it should assume in a severe form. The example for this type is the late blight. Late blight of potato. The late blight of potato. And similarly, we have a sporadic diseases. This is a disease where it occurs regularly in a location and in a relatively less instances or a low severity. Udbata disease of rice means it comes regularly but in a very less instances. And the last one, you might be hearing all the time, the pandemic. Now you can take the best example is your COVID in case of humans. So when epiphytic becomes prevalent throughout the country, I repeat, when epidemic or epiphytic becomes prevalent throughout a country or a continent or to the entire world, that is called as a pandemic. So it becomes very severe across the country, across the continent, and across the world. And here again, I can take an example of the late blight of potato, which had become a pandemic type in entire Europe. So basically, that is called as a pandemic disease. Okay. And at the last, today we'll be talking about based on the disease classification based on the multiplication of inoculum. Multiplication of disease classification based on the multiplication of an inoculum. Here we have two different types. One is called as a compound interest disease, a compound interest disease, where a compound interest disease is, this is an analog to the compound interest money. It is similar to a compound interest that you can see. So here, that is, it is an analog to the compound interest money. The pathogen produces spores at a very rapid rate. and spreads or disseminates through air. And spreads rapidly. Basically, this compound interest has incubation, sporulation period, which is very, very short. Means in a short period itself, they are able to produce a lot of spores. And the cycle of spore production is repeated. That is, the spores are produced in a repeated manner. And please make a note that several generations per life of the crop. In the same crop, the pathogen completes many life cycles. That is, the pathogen is able to complete many life cycles in the same life cycle of the crop. For example, if you take 120 days of your paddy, the pathogen completes many life cycles, like for example, Pyrrhucularia, rhizome. That is what I can make you understand. Each, like sometimes 50 to 400,000 uridospores. In case of rust, that is 50 to 400,000 uridospores are produced. That too, especially in 5 to 7 days. So this is called as a compound interest disease where several generations are produced. And at the last, it is a simple interest disease. So the simple interest disease is the mathematically analog to simple interest in money. That is, it is the mathematically analog to the simple interest in money. And here, one generation of the pathogen life cycle per crop or per the life cycle of the crop. That means the pathogen is able to complete only one generation per crop. The diseases like the seed-borne diseases or even the soil-borne diseases. And all your the airborne diseases are the compound interest diseases. The seed-borne and the soil-borne diseases are the simple interest diseases. Okay. So these are all the ways how we can classify the diseases based on the host, based on the plant parts, based on the symptoms, based on the severity, based on the mode of spread of a pathogen, and based on the multiplication of a inoculum or the pathogen itself. Okay. So here we're going to stop now and continue in the Monday's class. So if you have any questions. Yeah, so there is a question. The smut diseases can seen only in the cereals. Most often on a cereals, but in few cases we can also see on the fruit crops also. But they are bajra and all the small millets, all the small millets. So if there are no other questions, I will stop here and we will continue in the next class.